The captain's daughter found me on the deck, then whispered, "Grant changed the route logs." Part 1. The saltwater spray came hard over the port bow, cold enough to sting through my jacket and sharp enough to taste like metal on my tongue. I stood on the weather deck of the Azure Star with one hand locked around the steel lifeline and my boots planted wide on the wet teak. The hull rose, paused, and dropped into the next swell with a shudder that traveled up through the deck and into my knees. Somewhere below, the twin diesel engines beat out a rhythm that was almost right. Almost 3% out of sync on the port side. Not enough to alarm a passenger, enough to keep a captain awake. Above me, the bridge lights glowed through mist and salt. Below deck, the owners, board members, investors, and invited guests were sealed inside the grand salon with jazz, mahogany walls, and enough champagne to pretend the sea had no teeth. The Morgan Shipping Centennial celebration had been planned as a floating victory lap. 2 weeks at sea, 3 ports, one final arrival in San Francisco. Then, a board hearing where the company would decide whether Claire Morgan was ready to inherit more authority from her father. Everyone on board knew that part. What they did not know was that Grant Harris, my first officer and Claire's loudest internal rival, had spent the last month convincing the board that he was the modern future of the company and that Claire was only the owner's daughter pretending to understand operations. I did not care for corporate theater. I cared about the ship. The brass barometer outside the chart room had dropped 2 millibars in the last hour. The digital weather feed still showed safe conditions north of us, but the wind had already shifted. The sea was telling a different story. The ocean always spoke first. The heavy teak door from the passenger salon opened behind me, and warm light spilled across the deck. I turned. Claire Morgan stepped into the wind with one hand pressed around a folded packet of papers. She wore a formal navy dress under a thin gray shawl, completely wrong for the cold weather deck. Rain darkened the hem, her dark hair whipped across her cheek, but she did not retreat into the warmth. She looked toward the bridge first, then toward me. That was when I saw her hand tighten around the papers. I moved across the deck before she reached the slickest section, stopping far enough away to keep the boundary clear but close enough to block the worst of the spray. "Miss Morgan," I said over the wind, "this deck is closed to passengers in rough weather. I'm not here as a passenger." Her voice was steady, but the corners of the folded papers were bent under her fingers. "Then tell me the problem." She glanced once toward the salon door. "Grant changed the route logs," she whispered. The words cut through the storm better than any alarm bell. I looked at the packet in her hand. What logs? Fleet routing projections, draft limits, fuel ratios. The data uploaded to the bridge server 2 hours ago doesn't match the approved quarter plan. She stepped one careful inch closer, still keeping space between us. If I report him without raw proof, the board removes me before we dock. If I ignore it, 2 of our heavy freighters get routed into shallow reef lanes next month. The deck rolled beneath us. Claire adjusted her footing without reaching for me. "Good. What does Grant gain?" I asked. "Insurance exposure." Her jaw tightened. A subsidiary linked to his brother holds underwriting on the vessels most likely to be damaged. If the fleet takes a catastrophic loss, my father's holdings collapse under the debt. Grant presents himself as the rescue investor. The board hands him operational control. There it was. Motive, mechanism, deadline. I looked up toward the bridge windows. Grant's silhouette passed behind the glass, neat and still, like a man who had never been frightened by water. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Because you know this ship better than he does." She held out the folded packet. "And because you still trust analog systems when everyone else is worshiping dashboards." I took the papers without touching her hand. The first page was the approved Morgan Fleet Route Plan. The second was a bridge printout from the Azure Star server. The 2 should have matched. They did not. The altered draft limits were subtle. A casual review would miss them. A tired executive would approve them. A vessel following them would run too close to coastal hazards during loaded passage. My grip tightened on the paper. "This is ship safety," I said. "Yes. Then it is my problem." "I can't fire Grant tonight," she said. "The board requires quorum. He controls the bridge server, And he has Davis and Sterling convinced I'm emotional about my father stepping back. If I accuse him without unedited system logs, they'll use it to trigger a removal vote. Where did you get these? My father's office terminal before we boarded. Does Grant know? No. Good. Keep it that way. The bridge server is networked. I said, Grant can hide fingerprints there. But the engine room has an analog backup recorder that mirrors navigation inputs through a closed-loop feed. If he changed route data on the bridge, the backup drive should show timestamps. Her eyes sharpened. Can we get it? Yes, but not alone. The physical interlock requires 2 people, one to hold the manual override, one to pull the drive. I'll come. The lower access decks are loud, hot near the engines, freezing before that, and not meant for executives in formal shoes. I'll change. If we are seen together in the wrong place, Grant will use it. Then we bring Owen. That stopped me for half a second. Owen Parker was my chief engineer, the only man on the ship I trusted to argue with machinery and win. Claire read the answer in my face. He knows the engine room. He hates Grant, and if we need a witness, he's better than a closed door. I almost smiled. Not because she was charming, because she was right. 0300, I said. Aft service corridor, work clothes, no jewelry that can catch on equipment. Bring the original packet and nothing else. She nodded once. Behind her, the salon door opened a crack. Laughter spilled out, then vanished when the wind shoved it flat. Claire stepped back toward the light. Captain Mitchell, she said. I looked at her. Thank you for treating this like evidence, not hysteria. I folded the papers once and tucked them inside my jacket. I trust numbers, I said, and right now, yours are screaming. She went back inside. The door closed. The ocean hit the hull again, harder this time, and the port engine answered with that same 3% wrongness. I looked toward the bridge. Grant was still watching the sea like he owned it. Part 2. At 0300, the Azure Star had gone quiet, in the way large ships never truly do. Above, the passenger deck slept behind polished doors and heavy carpet. Below, steel pipes ticked, pumps throbbed, and the engines kept the night alive. I met Claire at the aft service corridor. She had changed into dark work slacks, flat-soled deck shoes, and a thick coat zipped to her throat. Her hair was tied back. The manifest packet was sealed in a waterproof folder under one arm. Owen Parker stood beside her with a tool roll in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. He looked at me, then at Claire, then toward the engine access hatch. I'm guessing this is not a romantic midnight tour. Claire's mouth moved like she wanted to smile but had too much at stake. No, she said, it's corporate sabotage. Owen sighed and handed me the coffee. I miss when people only clogged filters. I took one sip, bitter, hot, exactly right. Bridge status? I asked. Grant logged an auxiliary route check at 0140, Owen said. Then locked the nav console under his personal credentials. Claire looked at me. Is that unusual? On a calm night, yes. I said, on a night with falling pressure, worse. We entered the lower access stairs. The air changed with every level. First came cold steel and paint, then oil, then heat, then the deep physical thrum of the engines, so strong it made the bones in my wrist vibrate. At the engine room bulkhead, I stopped. Claire, I said. She looked up. You stay where I place you. You ask before touching equipment. If I say move, you move, not because you're incapable, because the ship does not forgive guessing. Understood. Owen, you witness everything. Owen lifted 2 fingers. Witnessing, complaining, multitasking. I opened the hatch. Sound hit us like weather. The lower engineering bay was all steel grating, yellow warning lights, hot metal, and the harsh smell of ozone. The backup recorder sat behind a bolted service panel near the aft monitoring rack, old-fashioned by design, isolated from the bridge network and ugly enough to be trustworthy. Claire held the flashlight while Owen unlocked the outer cabinet. Her beam did not waver. I knelt and removed the first retaining screw. This drive records all bridge navigation inputs, she asked. Coordinates, timestamps, route edits, manual overrides, and login source markers. Even if Grant deletes the bridge logs, If the mirror feed remained active, yes. And if he disabled it, then Owen will use language the company handbook discourages. Owen grunted from the side panel, already preparing. The second screw came loose. The third resisted. The ship rolled gently, not enough to knock anyone off balance, but enough for Claire to adjust her stance without being told. One hand braced on a safe rail, the other held the light exactly where I needed it. That mattered. People show you who they are when the floor moves. The final screw came free, and I opened the service panel. Inside, a green status light pulsed steadily. Owen leaned in. Mirror feed's alive. Claire released a breath through her nose. I connected a diagnostic cable and watched the small analog display wake. Timestamp entries scrolled across the screen: route upload, bridge terminal, Grant Harris credentials, draft limit alteration, fuel ratio edit, manual route projection override. There it was. A trail. Not a suspicion, not a feeling, a record. Claire stepped closer, then stopped herself before crossing into my workspace. Can we copy it? We can, but not pull the drive yet. If we remove it too early, Grant may see the loss of mirror feed. So we wait? We clone tonight. Pull the drive when we have to. Owen opened a protected case and handed me a clean storage module. For the next 20 minutes, no one spoke unless the work required it. The engines thudded. The cable light blinked. Claire held the flashlight and read the screen as each file copied. When the transfer completed, Owen sealed the duplicate module in a tamper bag and wrote the time across the label. Claire signed beneath him. Then she handed the pen to me. My signature looked heavy under the engine room light. Owen tucked the sealed module into his tool case. So we have enough to sink Grant? Not yet, Claire said. Enough to make him nervous, not enough to survive the board. I looked at her. She was not wrong. Grant had friends. The board had pride. A partial copy would be called incomplete, preliminary, misunderstood. To beat a man like Grant, we needed more than evidence. We needed the moment he tried to destroy it. When we climbed back into the service corridor, Claire paused near the hatch and rolled one shoulder like the engine noise had settled there. You do this every night? She asked. Not with executives. I mean, carry the ship in your head. I glanced toward the sealed corridor leading forward. A captain who does not carry the ship in his head should find another ocean. She looked down at her hands. A smear of machine dust crossed one knuckle. She rubbed it once, then stopped when it did not come off. I have spent years learning spreadsheets, contracts, port negotiations, union issues, insurance exposure, fleet schedules, she said. The board still looks at me and sees a daughter playing in her father's office. Then make them look at the logs. That simple? No. The corner of her mouth lifted. I opened the service door for her, but stepped aside without guiding her through. Simple and easy are different words, I said. She passed through first. The coffee Owen had handed me was nearly cold by then, but I finished it anyway. Cold coffee still kept watch. Part 3. By morning, Grant smiled too much. That was the first sign he knew something had shifted. He came onto the bridge at 08:30 with a fresh uniform, polished shoes, and 2 board members behind him like theater props, Davis and Sterling. Old money, older habits, both convinced that confidence and competence were cousins. I stood in the chart room, measuring drift with brass dividers over a paper nautical chart. Grant ignored the chart and tapped the digital display. Captain Mitchell, he said, bright enough for an audience. I was just explaining to the board that our arrival in San Francisco may be delayed by your insistence on maintaining this southern tack. Davis frowned. The centennial reception is scheduled tightly. The sea did not receive the invitation, I said. Sterling's eyebrows lifted. Grant smiled harder. The digital weather feed shows clean passage north. The southern tack costs time, fuel, and docking priority. Modern shipping requires trust in modern data. I placed the dividers down on the paper chart and pointed to the barometer reading logged by hand. The pressure has fallen 4 millibars in 2 hours, I said. Wind has shifted west-southwest. Wave intervals have shortened. We have a squall line forming north of our current position. Grant gave a soft laugh. With respect, Captain, that sounds like old-world instinct. No, it sounds like physics. Claire stood near the doorway, silent. Grant turned toward her. Miss Morgan, perhaps you can explain to Captain Mitchell that executive strategy includes operational efficiency. She stepped forward, but I raised one hand slightly, not to silence her. To spare her a fight that belonged to me? This vessel carries 112 civilians, I said. I will not take it into worsening seas to protect a reception schedule. If you want to dispute my route, write it in the ship's log with your full name attached. Grant's smile thinned. Davis looked at the paper chart again. You are certain of the weather? No captain is certain of weather, I said. Only fools pretend to be. But I trust the barometer more than a delayed feed. Sterling crossed his arms. Maintain the safer tack. Grant's jaw shifted. Claire's eyes met mine for one brief second. Then she looked away before anyone could name it. That afternoon, she played hostess in the Grand Salon. I watched from the upper passage as she moved from investor to board member to old family friend, answering questions with calm precision. No one saw the sealed evidence copy hidden in Owen's locker. No one saw the way Grant's gaze tracked her whenever she crossed the room. No one heard the ocean gathering itself outside the hull. At dinner, Grant raised a toast to a bolder century for Morgan Shipping. Everyone drank. Claire did too, but her eyes stayed on the storm-dark windows. At 22:30, Owen found me in the chart room with grease along his jaw and a maintenance tablet in his hand. Someone pinged the mirror feed after we copied it, he said. Credential mask, but it came from the bridge terminal during Grant's watch. Did he see the copy? No. He saw activity, enough to know someone looked. A slow pressure settled under my ribs. He'll try to erase it. Owen nodded. If he trips the master surge protector, the system forces a reboot and may overwrite the volatile logs. Claire stepped in before I could answer, carrying 3 covered mugs on a small tray. She looked from Owen to me to the open panel. Tell me. Owen did. Claire set the tray down. Then we planned for the moment he panics. I looked at the bridge schematic on the wall. If the digital system fails, passengers will panic. The board will gather in the salon. Grant will try to control the story. Owen stabilizes the engine room. I hold the helm. You pull the drive with Owen when I give the order. She nodded. And after? After we reach port. The answer was not optimism. It was instruction. She took it that way. Owen waited until she left before giving me a look. What? I asked. She brought you coffee. She brought evidence discipline. Sure, Captain. I returned to the chart, checked the breaker bypass. Fine, he said. But if you plan to suffer nobly, do it after we keep the ship floating. The storm line reached us sooner than the delayed digital feed predicted. Of course it did. Part 4. At 200, the storm hit. Not gradually, not politely. It dropped onto the Azure Star like a hand from the sky. The bow slammed hard into a wall of water. The bridge lurched. A mug shattered across the deck. Red warning lights blinked along the console as the wind screamed through the rigging with a sound like tearing metal. Port engine response lag, the junior officer shouted. I was already at the helm. Reduce throttle 7%, bring bow 2 degrees west. Owen, status. Owen's voice cracked through the internal comm. Port side surge alarms. I'm checking the panel. Grant gripped the side rail with both hands, pale under the bridge lights. We should call distress. We are not in distress. The digital nav is unstable. I can see that. The main display flickered. Once, twice. Then it went black. The bridge dropped into emergency lighting. For half a second, every man in the room stopped moving. Then training took over. Manual helm, I ordered, compass light, paper chart, kill non-essential loads. The junior officer moved fast. Good man. Grant moved toward the communications panel. I caught his wrist before he touched it. Do not transmit. His eyes flashed. You have no digital navigation. I have a compass. This is reckless. This is command. The comm snapped again with Owen's voice, harsher now. Captain, someone tripped the master surge protector from the bridge terminal. Not weather, manual command. The bridge went silent except for the storm. Grant looked toward the dark display. Too fast. That small glance told me more than any confession. Claire appeared in the bridge doorway wearing a deck coat, one hand on the frame to steady herself. "Captain," she said, "the board members are asking what happened. Tell them we lost digital navigation and are operating under manual protocol." Grant stepped toward her. "Tell them Captain Mitchell ignored modern safety systems until they failed." Claire did not look at him. She looked at me. "What do you need?" "Go to Owen. Pull the physical backup drive now. If Grant tripped the surge protector, he may be trying to force a reboot and overwrite the logs." Grant's face hardened. "She has no authority in the engine room." "She owns the ship," I said, "and I am authorizing it under emergency evidence preservation and vessel safety." Claire turned immediately. Grant moved as if to follow. I pointed to the helm. "You stay where I can see you." The storm took another swing at us. The deck rolled 30 degrees. A chair broke loose and slammed into the chart table. I locked both hands around the manual wheel and felt the rudder fight me through the steel. No screen, no satellite feed, no clean line of light to follow. Only the compass, the chart, the engines, and the sea. That was enough. Down below, Claire and Owen went after the drive. I heard pieces of it through the comm. Owen cursing at a stuck retaining bolt. Claire reading timestamp labels aloud. The ship rolling. The engine vibration shifting. Then Owen shouted, "Drive extracted, sealed. Claire has it." A wave hit us broadside, hard enough to make the entire bridge groan. "Port engine!" I shouted. "Stabilizing," Owen answered. "Give me 10 minutes. "You have 6? You're a cruel man, Cap. Alive men complain." Owen laughed once, breathless, and went back to work. For the next 6 hours, I held the Azure Star on a manual course through ugly water. The storm tried to push us north. I corrected west. The bow fought the swell. I gave back half a degree. The compass needle swung, steadied, swung again. Salt water hammered the bridge windows until the glass looked silver. Grant stood in the corner with both hands clenched and nothing useful to offer. At 4:15, Davis came to the bridge in a robe under a heavy coat, face gray with fear and anger. "What is happening to this ship?" "We lost digital navigation," I said. "We are under manual control." Grant stepped forward. Because Captain Mitchell refused to follow the safer digital course, I kept my hands on the wheel. "Mr. Davis," I said, "if you wish to observe, stand behind the marked line and do not interfere. If you wish to argue, return to the salon." His mouth opened. The ship dropped into a trough, and the argument left his face. He stepped behind the line. Grant tried again. "The board must understand." "The board will understand when we are alive enough to hold a meeting," I said. No one spoke after that. At 5:20, Owen restored partial port response. At 5:40, the wind began to shift. At 6:10, the bow stopped fighting every correction and started listening. Dawn came as a pale seam under the clouds. By then, my shoulders felt locked in iron. My hands ached from the wheel. My eyes burned from salt and instrument light, but the compass still answered. The chart still held. The ship still lived. At 7:15, Claire returned to the bridge. Her coat was streaked with engine room dust. A sealed evidence case hung from a strap across her body. Owen followed behind her, looking like he had wrestled a machine and offended it personally. Claire did not announce victory. She placed the sealed case on the chart table where everyone could see it. "Backup drive extracted under emergency chain of custody," she said. "Witnessed by Chief Engineer Parker. The mirrored logs are intact." Grant went still. Davis looked from the case to Grant, then to me. The ship rose through the last of the heavy swell. I gave the wheel one more correction. "Prepare for harbor approach," I said. No one argued. By dawn, the water had flattened into gray chop. San Francisco appeared through fog like something earned. The harbor pilot came aboard under a low, bruised sky. We docked without ceremony. Mooring lines hit concrete, engines eased down. The ship settled against the pier with a tired sigh that sounded, to me, like survival. Claire stood on the lower deck with Owen, the sealed evidence case in both hands. She did not wave. She only nodded once. I nodded back. Part 5. 3 days later, the emergency board hearing convened at Morgan Shipping headquarters. The building was all glass, steel, and old portraits of men who had mistaken inheritance for judgment. I sat outside the boardroom in my dress uniform, brass buttons polished, cap resting on my knee, ready for the possibility that my master's license might not survive the afternoon. Grant had spent the last 72 hours building his story. Captain Mitchell ignored digital protocols. Captain Mitchell endangered passengers. Captain Mitchell used outdated methods and caused system failure. It was a neat story. That was its weakness. Neat stories break when real logs arrive. The secretary opened the frosted glass doors. Captain Mitchell, they're ready? Inside, the long mahogany table was full. Davis sat at the head, Sterling on his right. Grant sat near the center with a folder in front of him and the satisfied posture of a man who believed the room had already chosen him. Claire sat opposite him. She wore a navy suit, simple and exact, with a sealed evidence case beside her chair. Davis adjusted his glasses. Captain Mitchell, First Officer Harris claims your decision to disregard the digital navigation system contributed to a dangerous failure at sea. I disregarded corrupted digital data. I said, I did not disregard safety. Grant gave a soft laugh. Convenient distinction. Claire opened the evidence case. The sound of the latches carried through the room. She removed 3 packets and placed them in front of Davis. Before Captain Mitchell answers further, she said, the board needs the complete record. Grant leaned forward. Claire, this is not the time for another emotional defense of... This is the raw backup drive from the Azure Star's analog recorder, she said. Extracted during the storm, sealed by Chief Engineer Owen Parker, witnessed by me, and transferred under Council's chain of custody protocol. The room went still. Claire placed the second packet down. This is Chief Engineer Parker's report confirming the bridge surge protector was manually tripped from a bridge terminal during the storm. The third packet followed. And these are mirrored input logs showing route edits, draft limit changes, and fuel ratio alterations made under First Officer Harris's credentials before the system failure. Grant stood too quickly. That drive was accessed without authorization. Claire looked at him for the first time. You uploaded false routing data to push Morgan vessels toward shallow hazards. You attempted to erase the logs during a storm with passengers aboard. Do not lecture this room about authorization. No one spoke. Davis opened the first packet. Sterling reached for the second. A legal advisor at the wall stepped closer. Grant's face lost color in stages. Claire remained standing. Her hand rested flat on the table, not shaking, not gripping, simply holding her place. For months, she said, Mr. Harris has argued that I lack operational judgment because I question digital projections when they conflict with physical conditions. Captain Mitchell made the same judgment at sea. He trusted pressure readings, wave intervals, compass bearings, and engine behavior when the digital system failed. That decision saved the ship. Davis looked at me. Is that your statement as well, Captain? My statement is in the navigation log. I said, the ship reached port with all passengers and crew safe. Claire slid one final document across the table. I am recommending immediate suspension of Grant Harris, pending formal referral to maritime authorities and legal counsel. I am also recommending a full fleet safety review and a temporary safety director appointment, pending HR, legal, and conflict of interest review. The last phrase mattered. Not because it protected me. Because it protected her. Clean lines, clean process. No favor that could poison the truth later. Grant turned on her. You planned this. Claire's answer was quiet. No, you did. I documented it. That was the end of him in the room. The board did not shout the way people do in stories. Real power protects its volume. They requested recess. They called counsel. They asked Grant to surrender his company devices. Security entered politely. Grant left without his folder. When the room settled, Davis looked older. Captain Mitchell, he said, the board owes you an apology. You owe the crew safer systems. Claire's mouth twitched. Davis nodded slowly. That too. I left before the hearing dissolved into committee language. My part was finished, and the dock was the only place in that building where I could breathe. An hour later, I stood beside the Azure Star. The sky over San Francisco had cleared to a pale blue. and the fog was pulling away from the harbor in slow ribbons. Crewmen moved pallets up the gangway. Owen was yelling at someone about mislabeled filters. The ship's hull rose above me, scarred with salt, steady against the pier. Footsteps sounded behind me. I turned. Claire walked toward me in a warm coat, her hair loose in the breeze. The corporate armor softened, but not gone. She looked tired. Victorious, yes, but tired in the way people are after they finally set down a weight and discover the shape it left behind. "Grant has been suspended," she said. "Council is filing the referral. Davis approved the safety review." "Good. That is all?" It is a strong word. A small smile touched her face. Then she looked out at the ship. "They want you for the temporary safety director role. I can't accept it today." Her eyes returned to mine. "Because of me? Because if I work directly with the executive board, and you are the executive recommending me, the line has to be clean. HR review, legal review, written terms. No room for anyone to say I traded professional judgment for personal loyalty." She looked down once, then back up. Still careful. Still necessary. The wind moved between us, carrying salt, diesel, and the distant sound of gulls. Claire stepped beside me, not into me, and rested her hands on the rail facing the water. "I used to think careful meant cold," she said. "It can. With you, it doesn't." I kept my eyes on the harbor because looking at her for too long made every rule feel softer than it was. She seemed to understand. "Then, no promotion today," she said. "No line crossed on a dock. No decision made while everyone is still calling us heroes." That would be wise. She turned her head slightly. "Coffee after the review. Then?" I looked at her. "Public place," she added. "Daylight, terrible coffee if necessary." This time, I did smile. Owen knows several terrible places. Then let Owen recommend one and not attend. The laugh came out of me before I could stop it. Above us, someone on deck called my name. A crewman needed a signature for the maintenance transfer. Ordinary work. Claire stepped back first. Not retreating. Choosing the distance. "I'll see you at the review, Captain Mitchell." "I'll be there, Miss Morgan." She raised an eyebrow. "Claire," I corrected. Her smile warmed the wind. Then she walked back toward the terminal, shoulders straight, coat moving behind her, no longer carrying the company alone. The barometer beside the gangway had started to rise. For the first time in years, command did not feel like isolation. It felt like standing beside someone who understood the weight of a locked wheel, a sealed log, a clean boundary, and a storm survived without pretending the sea had ever been gentle. The end.